Guys, today we're going to talk about the rise of dictatorial regimes. So obviously we're getting into World War II, and so we got to kind of set up the conditions for the war. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the rise of dictatorships here. So just looking at these pictures here. So we'll start right here. This is the Soviet Union. This is Joseph Stalin here. This is Francisco Franco. He's from Spain. And then you got Mussolini with Adolf Hitler. Obviously, Adolf Hitler's here as well. And then this is Emperor Hirohito from Japan. So those are different countries we're going to talk about. And we're going to kind of talk about their entry into the war, basically from the perspective of most of the enemies that the U.S. is going to fight during World War II. Okay, so let's get started. We're starting in Italy. So totalitarianism, this is where the government controls the political, economic, social, intellectual, and cultural lives of its citizens. So basically, the government controls almost every aspect of your life. And in these types of governments, they use propaganda in order to conquer the minds of their subjects and limited individual freedoms. So they use propaganda as a way to make you think it's a good idea to give up your freedoms, basically. So in Italy, we see this through what is going to be known as the fascist movement. So Benito Mussolini, that's this guy right here, he created the first European fascist movement. And basically, fascism glorifies the state above the individual. And there's a focus on a strong central state that's led by a dictatorial ruler. And so Mussolini established control over his people and exercised control over all media outlets. This is a reason why we have freedom of the press in this country, is the government cannot control the press. And the reason for that is because then the government could use that propaganda, like we're talking about, in order to sway the people's minds. Okay, Russia. So moving on to Russia, or the Soviet Union. So where we left off with them, Vladimir Lenin was in charge. So he adopted a new policy called the New Economic Policy. And he did this as a way to get through the Depression, because obviously the Depression hits Europe just like it hits the United States. And so under the New Economic Policy, he actually introduced capitalism into the socialism that they had. And so, shocking, I know, capitalism is going to make the market better. So he said that peasants could sell their produce openly, and then if you owned a company that had less than 20 employees, then you could be privately owned and operated. So then both of those, so the peasant farmers, and then the business owners, they could make a profit. And shocking, agricultural production and the market both go up because capitalism, once again, produces wealth. Okay? But this is going to be short-lived because Lenin is going to die. And so the Soviet Union was created in 1922 under Joseph Stalin, who is Lenin's successor. So Joseph Stalin used his position as the general secretary in order to gain control of the Communist Party. And what he did is he did this through, he was going to give away political positions in exchange for support. So he is going to overturn basically the new economic policy of Lenin by implementing the collectivization of agriculture. So what that means is there's no more private farms. The government owns everything. Okay, so the government owns all the farms. And so there's, like I said, the peasants will work the land that's owned by the government. And then the peasants are going to resist this because they were doing really well under Lenin, and so they resisted this by hoarding crops and killing off livestock, and so this is actually going to lead to widespread famine throughout Russia. Excuse me. So they established complete control by sending his opposition to work in forced labor camps in Siberia. Even the Bolsheviks were put on trial. So remember, the Bolsheviks from the Russian Revolution, those were the guys who actually started the Russian Revolution and introduced the socialist ideas into Russia. And so even they were put on trial and condemned to death. And throughout his reign as leader of the Soviet Union, he kills about 20 million people, which is way more than Hitler did. But we don't demonize him so much because he's going to be on our side during the war. Okay. Moving on to Spain. So Francisco Franco is going to lead a military revolt against the democratic government in Spain, which will result in a very brutal civil war. So eventually the Civil War will end when his forces capture Madrid, which is the capital, in 1939. Now, Spain doesn't necessarily join in World War II so much; they're not really involved, but they are very sympathetic to the cause of Hitler and Mussolini. So Franco does establish an authoritarian dictatorship, and he favored the traditional groups of the large landowners, the business people, and then the Catholic clergy. Okay, moving on to Germany. So in Germany, Adolf Hitler is going to enter politics by joining the German Workers' Party in Munich. And he took over the party very quickly. He was very charismatic, very charming kind of guy. And then it's going to be renamed the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or Nazi Party for short. And after an unsuccessful revolt against the government, Hitler was captured and imprisoned, and then that's where he wrote his memoirs, Mein Kampf, which means my struggle in German. And he endorsed German nationalism, strong anti-Semitism, which anti-Semitism is the hatred of Jews, and then anti-communism. So he had a very big fear of communism, in particular with the Soviet Union. And he's going to win the support of the right-wing elites of Germany. And in 1933, they're going to pressure the president to allow Hitler to become chancellor and to create a new government. And so what's going to happen, remember, they're going through the Great Depression at this point, and it's really deep in the Depression at this point. They are going to pass what's called the Enabling Act. So basically, it allowed the government to just ignore the Constitution for 4 years. You just don't have to worry about the Constitution, which is insane. But they just can ignore the Constitution and issue laws that are able to deal with the country's problems. And in 1934, the president died, which was convenient, and Hitler became the sole ruler of Germany. So at this point, Hitler's basically a dictator because the Enabling Act, he doesn't have to worry about a constitution anymore. And so the Nazi Party quickly brought all institutions under their control. They're going to purge the Jews from any civil service jobs, and they're also going to start to set up concentration camps. And so Hitler, his big dream was to have a purely Aryan state that would dominate the world. And so he wanted to create what he called a Third Reich. Okay, so this is the Third Empire of Germany. So the first empire was the Holy Roman Empire, which was started by Charlemagne, who was actually French, but it went into Germany. And then the Second Empire, the Second Reich, was that under Kaiser Wilhelm, and then this will be, according to him, the Third Reich. So to achieve this goal, Hitler and the Nazis used economic policies, mass demonstrations, organization, and terror. So the Schutzwaffen, which is also known as the SS, which is much easier to say, was used to carry out this terror. But you can see here, these are examples of the demonstrations that they put on. Okay. In addition, Hitler is going to start to create public works projects to help with the high unemployment rates and try to end the Depression. And then, like I said, they're going to use mass demonstrations and meetings in order to gain support and evoke excitement from the German people. And so that's what those pictures on the bottom are. One of the things they're going to do is they're going to pass the Nuremberg laws. So the Nuremberg laws were basically laws that persecuted Jews. And so it defined anyone who had at least one Jewish grandparent as a Jew. As it just so happens, under this, Hitler would have been considered a Jew. But he's exempt because rules for thee but not for me. They also excluded Jews from German citizenship. So if you had one Jewish grandparent, you were no longer considered a citizen. Stripped them of their civil rights. And it forbade marriages between German citizens and Jews. And if you were already married, like if you were a German married to a Jew, then your marriage would be dissolved. And then it forbade Jews from teaching in schools and participating in the arts. They didn't want them to have any kind of influence on children or any kind of propaganda or anything like that. And they also required Jews to wear the yellow stars of David and carry identification cards. So this right here is what they had to wear as a patch to identify them as Jew. So this literally means Jew in German. November 9th, 1938 is going to be what's known as Kristallnacht. Okay, so it means Night of Broken Glass. So during this night, the Nazis went basically ransacked the cities in Germany and burned down synagogues and Jewish businesses and sent 30,000 Jews to the concentration camps that they were building. Jews were also barred from all public transportation and public buildings, so they couldn't even go on a bus. They couldn't go into City Hall. They were prohibited from owning or working in any retail store. And so a lot of Jews in Germany were small business owners. So if you owned a store, that was just taken from you, just overnight, it was just gone. And so the SS encouraged Jews to emigrate from Germany, and many of them did, and many of them unfortunately went to Poland. If they were smart, they went to France they went to France and then to the United Kingdom, eventually getting to the United States. So that was a path many of them followed, many of the lucky ones. If they got to the United States, they were safe. But even the Jews in France were not safe because the Nazis will take over France during World War II. And many of them went into Northern Europe. I mean, they kind of spread all over the place. Okay. So Germany's path to war. So Hitler is going to violate the Treaty of Versailles. Remember, that's the one that ended World War I by creating a new air force and expanding Germany's army. So one of the things from that is they had to demilitarize. So France, Great Britain, and Italy even condemned this. Italy kind of just joining in because they were on the side of France, Great Britain during World War I. But Hitler's first aggressive move will be to invade a demilitarized zone in Germany known as the Rhineland. So that was that buffer that France had on the Rhine River that kind of buffered Germany from France. So it sat kind of right on the French border there. So Great Britain is going to start to adopt a policy of appeasement. So appeasement was basically, okay, well, you can have the Rhineland that is technically part of Germany, but don't do anything else. Okay, so they didn't actually take military action. But then Mussolini and Hitler created the Rome-Berlin Axis, which further violates the Treaty of Versailles because Germany was not allowed to make treaties. So this pact recognizes their shared political and economic goals. In addition, obviously, France and Great Britain are losing the support of Italy. This is also where we get the name the Axis powers because of the Rome-Berlin Axis. November 1936, Hitler is going to form an anti-communist alliance with Japan known as the Anti-Comintern Pact, and so that's an alliance against the Soviet Union. So Hitler is going to annex his homeland of Austria March 13th, 1938, and once again, Great Britain and France say, okay, well, you can have that. Yeah, that is technically yours because Austria was your homeland, so that's okay if you annex Austria. But then he wants the Sudetenland. So the Sudetenland is in present-day Czechoslovakia, or Czech Republic, Czechia. It's this area right here. He wanted to take that. Once again, France, Great Britain, Italy, and Germany are going to give in to his demands. So he's kind of like a kid in a candy store at this point. So, if you go to a candy store with a child and the child's acting up, and so to shut him up, you're going to just give him a piece of candy. Well, after that candy's gone, next thing you know, he's doing it again. He wants another piece of candy. And so to shut him up, you give him some more. And then it just continues in this path where you're almost rewarding that bad behavior. And it's kind of like that with the diplomatic relations between France, Great Britain, and Germany. And so Hitler continued to advance and demanded the Polish port of Danzig because he wanted a port to the Baltic Sea. So that's up here, okay? And then France, Great Britain knew that they needed Soviet help, but Hitler signed a non-aggression pact with them on August 23rd, 1939. Okay, but they do this to kind of get the Soviet Union kind of on their heels and kind of get them to relax a little bit because a little over a week later, September 1st, 1939, this is the start of World War II. Hitler will invade Poland. And so that violates that non-aggression pact. And so eventually the Soviet Union will reluctantly go to war against Germany. Okay, so Japan's path to war. So Japan has a little bit different path to war. So they wanted to be a major imperial power. And they wanted to control Manchuria. So Manchuria is in China. It's a region in China that's kind of, and if you look at a map of China, it's like to the northeast of China. So September 18th, 1931, the Japanese troops dressed as Chinese and they blew up a portion of a Japanese-owned railway. So basically what happened is Japan needed an excuse to seize Manchuria, but they had to make it look like there was some kind of provocation. And so Japan will retaliate by taking Manchuria. And so Japan didn't want to fight the European colonial powers or the US. But by 1940, they started to demand rights to French Indochina. So French Indochina is present day Vietnam. And so the US said, no, you can't do that. And we warned that we would retaliate with economic sanctions. So what we do is we put these sanctions on Japan, and this really hurts their industry. And we put even an oil embargo on there. But the thing is they are really dependent because they don't have a lot of natural resources in Japan. So they have to go outside of Japan to build up, to get the resources they need to build up their industry. And so after these economic sanctions and this oil embargo, Japan starts to plan an attack on the US. So we have a naval base in Pearl Harbor, which is in Hawaii. And it basically all of our Pacific fleet was in this one little bay, this harbor. And it was real shallow, so we thought it was safe. Well, it wasn't. So December 7th, 1941, the Japanese will bomb Pearl Harbor. And then the next day, December 8th, 1941, Congress will officially declare war on Japan. And then later on, we will declare war on Germany and Italy. And then eventually like Bulgaria and other countries like that. So that's kind of how we get into the war, is Japan's path to war is really similar to ours. So, all right, that's all I got for you today. Don't forget to do your processor and have a good day.